This is Dave Monk, Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board. This is Sunday, November the 25th. And this is WEFT's weekly radio program, The Prairie Monk, where we bring you information about rails, trails, greenways, and conservation, and giant pumpkins. Where did you find that, David?
It's been Thanksgiving, and I kind of appreciate Thanksgiving. You meet up with a lot of people, and you have memories, and it's rather wonderful. So, yes, but somebody left me a pumpkin.
This is a week to go on YouTube and watch this episode, if only this far, because you'll see, I'm sure there are bigger pumpkins. Oh, someone out there has got a larger one than this, but this is a big pumpkin.
Yes, well, it's interesting that Australian pumpkins often tend to be blue. And some people brought back seed from Australia at one stage locally to St. Joe, and the pumpkins never turned orange. And that was a real problem for the family. But they were big pumpkins. They're cattle pumpkins, and we feed cattle on big blue pumpkins. And we have to chop them up into fine pieces just so they don't get them stuck in their throats. But the cattle really enjoy them. And people enjoy different styles of pumpkins. There are a gazillion different varieties. So let me remove the pumpkin. So I went to 3 different places, and Chenoweth and Martins and the Ayers, and this was interesting to meet with a range of different people and different backgrounds and interests and excitements and curiosities. I had a question about Dogtown. So where's Dogtown? Dogtown's in some, up there by Paxton. But it has all sorts of histories and mysteries about it. And so I didn't know about Dogtown. But I have to now find out about Dogtown. But anyway, today we have Trudy Crozen. How do you say it? Creven. And she's a ceramic engineer, but she's also from an Australian background, from an Austrian background. And I'll let her say some things to you, because she has a wonderful accent, partly from Australia, partly from traveling around the world, partly from her parents, probably. And so I'll let her tell you a little bit about her biography so that you can share her excitement.
Right. Well, g'day, folks. This is Trudy Creven from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Department of Materials Science and Engineering. I've been a professor here for 34 years. Right. And I was born, I'm supposed to talk a bit so you get used to my accent, except I don't think I've got an accent. You got the accent.
Of course we do.
Right. Yeah, well, so I was born in Austria, 42 kilometres south of Vienna, and it was actually across the road from where Joseph Haydn worked for in Schloss Esterhazy, and down the street where Franz Liszt used to teach piano. But then my parents came to Australia in 1953, and I grew up in Australia, and I did a PhD in physical and inorganic chemistry in 76 in the University of Adelaide, South Australia. And then I cast my fate to the wind, and the wind blew for postdocs, 8 years of postdocs, 1 year in Canada, 3 years in Berkeley, 4 years in Germany, Max Planck, Stuttgart, and then back to Berkeley. And then I got this position at the University of Illinois in 1984, and I've been here ever since.
And part of the reason why we're talking to Trudy is that she's a ceramic engineer, and she works with polymers, and we are trying to put in 4 miles of railroad between Whiteheath and Seymour so that we can get historic trains into Champaign. and some of those historic trains, especially if the steam engines, are very heavy. So you need a responsible railroad bed, and this is a combination of heartland pathways with an easement to the Champaign, Havana, and Western Historic Railroad. This is where you had a whole bunch of people trying to get across the rivers going west, and there was always an accolade for the first ones that made it, so to connect the western and the eastern parts of the U.S. So this was one of those lines that got as far as Havana. That's why the Havana is in the title. And we're talking about railroad ties. And so this can be a little technical, but that's all right. We don't have any trees anymore. 2,000 ties a mile you're needed. So there's no forests that would provide that sort of wood. And you have to know you can use second-hand wood, or you can buy new wood, but it's $47 a tie, or even more than that. And the ties are different. The old ties were put in with a broadaxe. So if you had a bendy grain to the tree, you had a bendy railroad tie. And today those ties are very straight, and that makes them a little bit more susceptible to weather, so break down more easily. And there's also creosote involved, and so Trudy has different ideas about how you work with railroad ties, but she works with a whole bunch of other things, and she may mention the other uses of the things that she's working with, and it's rather exciting to talk to her and figure out what's going on. So I'll hand over to Trudy, and she'll tell you something about the ceramic industry and where it fits in, and you have a bunch of students that you go places and
Right.
and even back to Australia.
Yes.
And so, yes.
Well, thanks, David. Yeah. Well, at the university, I teach ceramic engineering, and in the last 20 years, we've developed a research area called geopolymers. That's they're inorganic polymers. Like, in the old days it was plastics was a breakthrough. Well, now it's geopolymers, and they're inorganic polymers. They're aluminosilicates, and they're made from clay. And it's called water glass, which is amorphous silica, like ground up beer bottle glass, amorphous silica, or Cabasil from Tuscola down the road. And alkali, like sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. So these geopolymers are a potential solution to partial solution to global warming because they can replace cement. To make 1 tonne of Portland cement, you liberate 1 tonne of CO2 into the atmosphere. And we're getting more and more trouble with global warming, like the fires in California and the hurricanes in Florida. So we've got to do something. And the geopolymers are a new class of material, and they're between cements and ceramics in terms of mechanical properties. Cements, you know how to make a normal cement. You make up a solution and you pour it and you let it sit, and it reaches full strength in 28 days, about a month. Ceramics, traditionally, it's called shake and bake. You get the different components and you press them together, and you have to heat them to very high temperature, like 1200 C for a long time. So it's a high energy process. A lot of the ceramics industry in the States has gone offshore to China, or else we buy tiles and ceramics from Europe, from Italy, Spain, Portugal. But geopolymers are a potential new product because you make them from clay. Clay is kaolinite. When you heat kaolinite to 750 C for 1 hour, then you drive off the water and it becomes metakaolin. And now that is a very reactive product. And you mix it with this alkali silicate solution and you make a paste. And you pour that paste into a shape, and then at room temperature it sets. You didn't have to light a match. Looks like a ceramic, feels like a ceramic, breaks like a ceramic, but you didn't have to fire it. And that's why it's a big energy-saving material. And now the reason it can be a replacement for Portland cement is because while to produce 1 tonne of cement, you produce 1 tonne of CO2. In geopolymers, to produce 1 tonne of geopolymer, you release only 1/4 of a tonne of CO2. The geopolymer composite is twice as strong as cements in compression. It's 3 times as strong in flexure, and it sets to full strength in 1 day instead of 28 days. And it's got half the density of cement. So this is a new material, and at the University of Illinois we've been studying it for about 20 years, and I tend to organise 3 or 4 international conferences a year, and so far I've edited 21 books on geopolymer conference proceedings, and we've written 70 papers, and we're still working on it. Meanwhile, here in Illinois, in Champaign, we've got the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and there's a section of it called ERDEC, Engineer Research Development Center, and a subsection of that is CERL, Construction Engineering Research Lab. And they've been very interested and supported some of our PhD students for the last 5 or 10 years to do PhDs. And the Army is very interested in finding applications for geopolymers. There are a lot. So meanwhile, focusing on the railway ties, there's a colleague there, Rich Lampo, who's interested in railway ties. Many years has been working on that. Some about our one project that we have with Dr. Ghassan Al-Char here at CERL has been on rejuvenation of railway ties.
So we take out old ties that are broken down a little bit, and you can repair them.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't want to take them out. We want to repair them in situ.
In situ? Oh, wow.
Right. Because there's a case in Australia around about Melbourne Way where they took out a whole bunch of ties and put in nice, big, strong concrete ones, but it shifted the settlement of the rail so much that the train has to go really slowly over it, and sometimes the train's 1 or 2 hours late, and that's a bit of a problem. Either you should rebuild the whole track again from scratch, or, well, now you just drive the train late and you bump a lot. So on TV I saw the people jump around and bump around because it didn't settle properly.
Yes, if you watch a train going over a certain part of the railroad, you can see it move down and
up and down.
And what your polymers do is allow that flexibility so that railroad tie can move.
Actually, it's not the geopolymer. Geopolymer is sort of like a super-duper glue that's much stronger than cement. It's the reinforcement. And we've been studying a whole bunch of different types of reinforcements, but the holy grail in ceramics is called graceful failure. It's like the ceramic analogue of ductility. ductility, and so there's various reinforcements that you can add to the geopolymer to make sure it doesn't just fail suddenly like a ceramic usually does, but like a metal, it goes bend, creak, and has some give to it. And so that's what's our expertise, how to tailor the properties of the composite material to exhibit graceful failure, structural ceramics. We Dr. Ghassan El-Char wrote a proposal within Searle, and we got some funding. And we collaborate with Dr. Morzan Izar, Professor Izar at the University of Illinois in Chicago, Department of Civil Engineering and Materials, or Civils and Materials Engineering. And we have worked out a suitable formulation of geopolymers that you could use in railway ties. And we've made railway ties up there, and we've mechanically tested them, like 9 inches by 10 inches by 10 feet. And so we have a start. We know how to make it and break it and see what sort of mechanical properties we've got. So there are two types of materials. In the geopolymer community, there's a bunch of civil engineers running around saying they're doing geopolymers, and a bunch of material scientists like myself who actually do geopolymers. But right now there's a new material, the last, 20, 30 years, it's called alkali activated cements. And a lot of the people civil engineering are making alkali-activated cements. So in cement, the reason cement is because the binder phase is calcium silicate hydrate, CSH for short. And now alkali-activated cements, can be made from waste materials like fly ash and slag. Slag comes from making steel. It's the frothy ceramic part on the top of the steel plant. And fly ash comes from burning coal. And fly ash comes as different types, but there's Class F and Class C. Class C fly ash has a lot of calcium in it, and Class F doesn't have a lot of calcium. So we can use the Class F fly ash and mix it with slag and add like sodium hydroxide and mix it all together and let it set. And the binder phase is mostly calcium silicate hydrate, just like in cements. But there is some geopolymer in it, and we just finished a PhD on it by nuclear magnetic resonance to show that there's about 15% geopolymer in it, or less, depends on the formulation. So now this can be used. This is a cheaper version that can be used to make railway ties.
You're even using things like cordgrass from the prairie, which if we didn't have a prairie, you wouldn't have the cordgrass. So we talk to people about that. But
yes.
Keep going.
So that's a possible material to make into railway ties. Another possibility is real geopolymers from clays. So we've made various composites and measured their mechanical properties. We started with living in the Midwest here, we're surrounded by corn, so we started with corn husks. You know, corn, you peel it like a banana and you get a pile of corn husks that are just about as big as the little corn cob itself. Well, that corn husk has got cellulose fibres and in between lignin. And if you wash it out with caustic soda solution, then you've got these cellulose fibres. And these cellulose fibres can be, they're like spaghetti. You could clone them out with your fingers or else just leave it as a pile of spaghetti and put it into geopolymers and you can make a strong composite. 15 megapascals. All right. High-strength concrete flexure strength is 7 megapascals. You put corn in geopolymers and you get to 15 megapascals. And the strain to failure is 15%. That means you can bend it till it's 15% longer and then it'll fail. Typical ceramic strain to failure is 0.1%. So it's 150 times more bendable. Now corn is fine, yeah, but like David said, there's other stronger natural reinforcements. Fibres, yeah, like the cordgrass, which is like mini bamboos. My colleague from architecture department, Professor Taylor, has Mark Taylor. He has brought me hemp. So I've been down the Amazon in Manaus. I have some collaborations, and they've got local fibres which are very strong. We got some jute, but teak, which is sisal, and malva, and kura'ua. So these are various fibres. So we got samples of them, and we made composites, and they also give very good properties. Kura'ua is deeper in the Amazon, and Daimler-Benz uses kura'ua for. It's very impact resistant. So some impact parts of the Mercedes car, they use kura'ua fibres. So we've found that the impact was 3 times better than these other very strong fibres. Meanwhile, being on the hunt, the strongest natural fibre is hemp. So the British sailed around the world and they discovered Australia with hemp ropes, and now hemp, according to the old history from India and China, hemp comes from the marijuana plant. So marijuana is grown for hallucinations, but also there's various strains which are for very strong fibres. Now these strains of very strong fibres is what we are now going to put in with the geopolymer to make composites. Meanwhile, I did get from Manila some it's called Manila hemp from the Philippines, and it's called abaca. And abaca is hemp from the banana leaf, and it's chopped up and it's made into very strong paper to write your will on. Well, we got hold of some of that hemp and we chopped it up even more to about 1 millimetre in length, and we dispersed it in geopolymers, and we got maximum, that's our benchmark strength, 52 megapascals.
Whoa. What times stronger?
7 sevens at 49, 7 times stronger than high-strength concrete. And so we think that, meanwhile, I have a research colleague in Finland, and she's got 9 bales of hemp ready to ship if the University of Illinois accepts it, to try to add to this geopolymers or alkali activated cements to make really strong composites. Meanwhile, we've from the architecture school we got a bag of hemp chopped up in half-inch lengths, and my student now is in the process of making composites, then we'll see what sort of strengths we get. But we expect at least 7 times the strength of concrete.
Weird question. Do you have agronomists who are breeding these fibres? Do you have new plants that might be more successful even yet?
Well, I don't, but I have a friend whose name is Eric Pollock, who's been involved with the legislation in the Illinois level, state of Illinois, and also the national level. He's got this WWW hemp, World Hemp Organization, and they've managed to recently pass legislation that in the state of Illinois we can grow hemp for fibre strength, but for research. So, David, you mentioned that in Illinois we got good climate and natural hemp that could be grown, and there's still pockets of natural hemp that was left over from the war. So I mean, it's possible to grow this natural hemp and use that as a reinforcement.
Yes, and what I was thinking of to improve that, just the same way as you bred soybeans from plants that they collected around the world, you're collecting fibres from around the world, but their fibre plants could be bred the same way, so that the agronomists could give you a even stronger fibre.
Right. Yeah, well, no, whatever people send me or I can get a hold of, I make composites. The other thing is, you can make geopolymers from basalt. Basalt is volcanic ash. There's volcanic ash on Mars.
Very rich volcanic ash.
Right, and there's volcanic ash on Mars. So this is sort of a new field with a lot of potential. The Army's interested because you should use your local resources, whatever resources you've got. Clay is pretty ubiquitous, and for example, my collaborators in the Amazon, they've come up to Illinois 3 years now, come and go. And they brought the clay from the Amazon, from Brazil and Colombia, and it's geologically, I think, a young country. And there's jungle, but under the jungle there's this clay, and it's 75% kaolinite and 25% quartz. So the quartz is its natural reinforcement, and so they brought it here, and then. We made geopolymers out of it. There's also bamboo in the jungles of the Amazon. There's a plant, a big, strong bamboo plant called Guadua angustifolia, and it's used to make 4-story houses. I mean, it's so strong. So what they did was splinter it up, cut it up and bring it here, and we made geopolymer composites using their kaolinite clay and their chopped up bamboo, and we can make composites that have got flexure strength 7 megapascals, which is the same as high strength concrete, but you didn't have to fly it in. You just use your local resources. And you don't make cements by heating, 1 ton of cement to 1400 C. You just heat to 750 C and you release water instead of CO2.
Explain a little bit. People may not realise that when you look at clay, it's a crystalline material. And so kaolinite clay is different from vermiculite clay, and one holds water and one
Oh, no. The clays are a family of silicate sheets and alumina sheets, and they're crystalline. And actually, geopolymer or water glass, the alkali silicate solution can't attack a crystalline species. That's exactly the essence of it. How come you can make a ceramic at room temperature when everybody else has got to heat it to 1500 C for an hour? And that's the secret, is that when you take a crystalline clay or vermiculite or boehmite and you heat it, you remove the water, then it makes it amorphous. And the aluminum is in five-fold coordination. There's 5 oxygens around it, and one of those is a double bond. And that double bond is highly, highly strained. And that's how come the water glass, the silicate solution, can attack it and precipitate out tetrahedra. And then, like a organic polymer, you got monomers that go together and split off water and then make a long chain. Here you got silicate and aluminate tetrahedra that react together, split off water and form a chain. And that's the whole essence of it, to make it amorphous and not crystalline. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg, because aluminosilicates and clays, they require high pH alkaline solution to dissolve them and react them. But there's magnesium phosphates, they require acid solution. And so Argonne National Lab has been doing a lot of research in magnesium phosphates in organic polymers, except they haven't studied it to the same depth that we have. And meanwhile, I've found from these 19 conferences that I've organised, zincates and cuprates, copper and zinc in organic polymers, also seem to exhibit this behaviour. So in India, there's some ancient old memorial obelisk that was made out of cuprates, but the pH they use is neutral, 6 or 7. And so this is a general, possible general observation of inorganic polymers. So, you know, when we had the movie The Graduate, and one of the fellas took these new students aside and he said, hey, there's one word, plastics. Well, the time is, there's one word, geopolymers.
Then we still are worried about plastics in the oceans and things like that.
Oh, yeah, because they don't decompose.
Yeah. So it's like our audacity to be tying ourselves to the commentary on geoplastics. But on the common side, is it possible to take your mould and your expertise and make some concrete ties experimentally so that we can perhaps do some of this sort of stuff ourselves?
Yes, darn right. That's what Cyril is now trying to set up, a congressional mandate for all the army depots to rejuvenate their railway ties with geopolymers. Like they don't use as much creosol to stop all the bugs eating the wooden ties, and so they get big potholes in them. And it's really not a good idea to take them out, although there are machines take out and replace the tie, but might be cheaper to just put walls in and refill it with geopolymer composites.
So you have to understand that in our situation, we don't have any ties. They have been, the railroad 4 miles has been abandoned totally.
Yeah, well.
So we have a little creosote in the soil, and we have some gravel, and we have a ballast that's there. So we're resting new ties on that ballast.
Right, yeah. So you could do this like in situ, get a truck with like a generator on the back to make the electricity to stir at high shear stirring machine, make a formulation and pour it in situ out in the field. All you need is the mould. So you can use plastics for that, or you can use geopolymers, and then it'll stick to geopolymers, and you leave it there. If you make a thin little mould, but you just pour it and let it set, and like as if it was a concrete, except it'll have much better performance.
One question. So this stuff sounds great. It's so many times more strong than cement and such. But one thing you haven't talked about, what does it cost compared to cement, regular everyday?
Well, see, that comes to the economy of scales. Like, but mud doesn't. Well, at the moment, it does cost more, and but we always. It's not so bad. The metakaolin depends who you get it from. The cheapest that I'm getting it from is $350 a tonne, but it goes up to $1,350 a tonne. So railway ties is one application, but there are other higher tech applications for which
you might be able to put it in bones in replacement in medical situations, and so it has a lot of different. We're just talking about ties, but it has a lot of applications.
Yeah, right. The other application that we're looking at now, I'm going next week to Australia, to CSIRO, Commonwealth Scientific Industry Research Organisation, to look at how to use geopolymers to hold molten salts like sodium chloride, potassium chloride, for solar energy to make electricity. So the sun rises in the morning, it melts the salt, you take away, it's called latent heat of fusion, you take away a little bit of heat when it goes from liquid to solid, and if you have enough, a paddock full of these cylinders containing molten salt, you take it off and you make electricity with it. So they've got this big setup in New South Wales in Australia, and they just need something to contain the molten salt, and that's where geopolymer comes in. The other big useful feature is we've demonstrated you can 3D print geopolymers.
That's a whole new technology. It's coming up, and yes.
And so right now the University of Illinois and the Army, we're working together to set up a congressional mandate for the state of Illinois to ask for $4 million. The Army will get $2 million right off the bat, and the university gets $2 million, and they take 60% for overheads, and I get maybe $800K to do the research. But the topic is robotic 4D printing of geopolymer composites for extreme situations. And it's 3D printing plus time. So when you vibrate it and first lay it, it's runny, but you give it a few seconds and it'll be solid. So you pick it up like a rock. But that can take the heat, so you can keep the weight. That can take the weight, and so you keep printing and printing and printing. And now it's robotic because you get a robot to do it instead of you doing it. And the extreme situations that the Searle is interested in is extreme cold in Alaska, extreme heat like the bushfires in California, and nuclear fallout, nuclear remediation. So if there's a nuclear accident, you should send the robot in to build a wall around it and fence it off. And because geopolymer is so much stronger than cements and sets faster than cements, you could put a lot of particulates in there, like lead oxides or heavy metals, to absorb. Nuclear is alpha, beta, gamma rays and neutrons. Alpha, beta and neutrons are readily stopped by geopolymer, which also contains water in there still. but neutrons need heavy metals like lead oxide. So that's the research area that we're writing a proposal for to the US government through the lobbyists in Congress. But that's where we're at.
It's interesting that I go to railroad engineering seminars so that I can understand railroad language. And the Finland people are into this. They butt up against Russia.
Yes.
And they're cold.
Yes.
And they need some of these sorts of products.
Right.
Do these products get into the steel? There's
Steel?
a lot of concern. If you have a railroad diamond, for instance, where one rail crosses another one, those are areas of real wear. And so they need certain products that will allow the railroad wheel to move up and over another railroad line. So is this can this apply to inclusion in steel fabrication?
Inclusion in steel. The only experience I had was with Professor Enrique Rees in systems engineering, ISE, on campus. He's a specialist in NDE, non-destructive evaluation, and we with him we got a rebar and we coated it with geopolymer and we put it in cement and we let it sit for a month, and then we did this accelerated corrosion, but it wouldn't corrode. So it sticks to steel and is very corrosion resistant. I think you're wanting to put the particles in the steel.
Yes, I'm wondering if that can be included. It's a whole different process, but and it might be way out of your field.
We wouldn't put geopolymers in, but we would use geopolymers
To protect.
To make silicon carbide. Which is very hard and wear resistant, that you could throw into the steel. Geopolymers are nanoporous, nanoparticulate. So if it's nano, the diffusion distance is very short. So now the current way to make silicon carbide is you go to some hydroelectric power source, like in the Bordens there in southern Germany, and you get silica, sand and coke, carbon, and you mix it up and you heat it to 2,500 C for 2 days, and then it diffuses together and forms silicon carbide, but then you've got to grind it, and silicon carbide is very hard. It's a grinding medium itself. Now, when you use geopolymers, it's got self-assembled nanoparticle size. When you take that and you mix it with carbon, you just have to heat to 1,600 C for 2 hours instead of 2,500 C for 2 days, and you make nano-silicon carbide, so you don't need to grind it. And so you could do that with silicon carbide, you can do that with silicon nitride, which is used as a wear-resistant material, like brake pads on aeroplanes. And so those nanoparticles that you can make via the geopolymer route would be used to put into the steel to harden it.
Okay, so I'm not so out of whack.
No, not really. You just have to be careful. But already you make steel not in air, so don't let it oxidize. So it hasn't been invented yet, but that's the way you do it.
Well, we have 15 minutes left.
Oh, righto.
And I would like to change the topic a little bit. We're still interested in the ties, if it could be conceived.
Yeah, we did make 2 ties up at the University of Chicago. We made it out of the alkaline.
So it's a long way from real application where we can put in 1,000 ties, probably.
No, it's not really a long way. We just need money.
Yes, that's part of it.
Funny you should mention. I mean, we could do it. We got the technology, But, you know,
So some of our railroad beds are multi-million-dollar projects, and so it won't happen in our generation. So we're looking for a different generation.
but we could start up an industry here. We could repair all the railway ties in the US.
The main lines are kind of concerned. The target for the railroad seems to be on main lines between Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, and the little lines are there, and they can be re-railed, or they can be natural areas, or they can be recreational corridors. There are 34,000 miles of recreational trails on railroads, and we are a little in competition because the recreation usually trumps preservation. People are more into the recreation. They need to jog, they need a bicycle, and so we're out there trying to save our prairies, and it would seem that sometimes this might be a process where you can go to a bridge, for instance, and instead of putting in ties, you could flood the bridge with a polymer mix, and you could flood it just the same way as you flood a concrete floor. I don't know whether that would work.
Flood the what? Flood
the material that you're putting down, instead of putting it in ties. You have a mat.
Right.
That you put on a bridge, for instance, where there's a lot of stress.
Well, that's another application. One is for bridge decks that rust because cement can't stop them, but geopolymer can.
Yeah.
And there's another thing called deployable structures. And there were in the architecture department, there's a professor who Sudarshan Krishnan, and he's an expert in deployable structures. And he showed me like you can make a rolled up bridge, and then you get to the end and you unroll it, and so you can you can also build it as you're going along. Or else it depends how long the bridge is.
It's kind of interesting that one of the prairie experts will grow little blue stem in a pipe.
Yes.
And get 18 feet of roots.
Yeah.
And then she will roll that up and take it to a meeting.
Oh,
and just indicates that the native fibre there has some flexibility. It just came to my mind.
Oh, yeah. No, you segment it, you know. That's another application for geopolymers, like fireproof structures. You know, in Australia we get a lot of bushfires, and especially now in California. So in Australia you have a shed at the back, you know, usually out of asbestos, but you can have this fold-up structure, like a little room, you know, and it's all folded flat, but you can unfold it and put the roof on, and then everybody can, the family can run in around, say, a cylinder of air and stay there and wait till the fire passes.
Yes, one near where my sister lives, the whole town got burned up very quickly.
Yeah. Well, see, these geopolymer composites we're making now, they can take 2,500 F without batting an eyelid. That's 1,200 C, and so the fire can lick the sides, but there's nothing to burn, so it'll go around it and keep burning something else, you know. Meanwhile, your family survives.
Yes.
And also for the firemen themselves, you know, when the fire turns around and comes back. There's also these dome structures that you can unfold and you get in. It's a one-man dome to survive in while the fire burns around you. So we worked out a composition. I've called it Ash G and Ash C, amorphous self-healed geopolymer and amorphous self-healed ceramic. The geopolymer is stable to 1000 C, which is 2000 F. Then the worst thing it can do is crystallize and become a ceramic, which is, depend on its composition, stable to 1693. And centigrade, which is about 3,000 some.
Centigrade.
Yeah, Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and so when the geopolymer contains little nanoponds of water, because that's how it was made. When the water goes away, if you put amorphous glass in there, then the glass flows into the cracks and seals it. That's why it's self-sealed or self-healed geopolymer composite. And then that's all right till about 1200 F. That's our benchmark at the moment. 1200 C, which is 2500 F.
So you've obviously worked with this experimentally. Is it already at a position where someone could make this commercially viable?
Yes. Well, I have a spin-off company from the U of I. And we did a job for the Army under SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant, but we're writing another one, another SBIR to the National Science Foundation. And then there's another but I'm sort of sworn to secrecy.
Go on. No one listens to WEFT. You're fine.
It's called non-disclosure agreement, and so we have to do it, and then they're going to make a big splash, like through Home Depot, how to do it.
So I want to change this topic a little bit. You're a woman in a man's world in a university, and you've been able to marry Richard, your husband, and have 4 adult children. And I wonder if you have any comment that would help others that says you can do this. You had the help of your mother who enjoyed the child raising. But are there any things that you can say to future generations of women? When I go to seminars, there are women who, especially doing electronic things, and how do we encourage women to have families, but also to use their tremendous brains to do things?
Well, number one is you need a strong backup team. It's all a team effort. And I've been very grateful to have that. I think I went to an all-Catholic girls' school, and there weren't fellas around to tell you that you're supposed to be dumb, and you had no idea you're supposed to be dumb.
Well, I went to all-boys school, same sort of thing.
Yeah, and the nuns just be who you are, grow to your full potential, and that's what you do. When I got to university, Australia's a bit on the male chauvinistic side, a lot on the male chauvinistic. And so you have to be the strong silent type, the loner, the strong loner. That's how I got by. Like when we had labs, nobody wanted to be partnered with a girl, so they'd had 3 fellas in a lab, and I was the only person in my lab. I had to do 3 times as much just to... But the tougher the training, the better the soldier, as the nuns
My
used
wife
to
is
say.
a cultural anthropologist, geographer, and if she went back to Australia, she would have to sit in a hierarchy of mostly male people getting the jobs, and so here she's been very happy to be able to get promotion, and so that's another factor that's involved. You need the promotion to be able to get grant money and work with things.
That's right. You just do the best you can, and I was lucky. I got into Berkeley, and that's a top-rate university, and there's everybody else in the world there. And here at Illinois is a top-rate university. Like, this is a bit of the world. Everybody in the world is here in Illinois, and they don't care if you're purple with pink stripes. It's just whatever you do that counts, and they give you a fair go. and you got to be lucky. But you get a little opportunity, you do the best. Then you get a medium-sized opportunity, you do the best you can. And people say, yeah, did all right. Every opportunity you get, you do the best you can with it. And after a while, people give you more and more opportunities.
Well, your children are doing interesting things too. Pat works with you to some extent.
Yes, he's been working at the Army Corps of Engineers for 2 years now, doing 3D printing of cements, and he's been teaching soldiers and Marines how to do it. And
you have 3 daughters that are all doing interesting things and having families.
Yes.
That's the thing. We need to have the universities provide a system where there's creches, there's backup for people to take leave without having to come back in 6 weeks, and leave for males to do home development. Your husband does a lot of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's running around at the moment distributing bread to poor people.
Yeah, that's right.
So
he works very hard.
So there's an academic side to your life, but there's a homebody with music, and you play instruments, and your children play instruments, and you get along, and you're European Catholic. He's Irish Catholic, and you're just different souls, and our family, and they are part Indian, and so there's Indian and Chinese, and how do you work all those
multicultural.
things? Okay.
Right.
I think we have to roll. Thank you, Trudy.
Well, thank you very much
for coming and talking to us in a very exciting fashion. And I hope that your things go. I think you're probably a little beyond our practical applications at the moment, but in time. So this is Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WAFT, Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board. As always, the views and opinions expressed are solely those of the speakers and no one else.